Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of TEDXcellence, the show in which I drink pepper jacks to dull the pain of watching intellectually questionable presentations from community-organized events. Here, in my Corona bunker, on the moon, with Dogcat Fox, a pepper jack, and all of you. Hello, friends. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Saturday. If that matters. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Hope you are all well. Hope you are all healthy. I guess healthy and well are kind of the same thing, depending, but either way. Hello. Oh boy, do we have an exciting adventure today with all new features and a very lengthy presentation. Yes, this TEDx talk is about 21 minutes long, thereabouts, so God knows how long this is going to take, so I'll jump right into things. Hello, Havoc Vladimir Stolanov, Old Guy Gamer, hello, Hazmat Sad Boy, hello, Asian Hippie, hello, Dark Alile, hello, Viror Vashmadai, hello, Andrew Joyner, hello, Thrashy, hello, Humble Clay, hello, John Smith, hello, and who else is here? Whoop, and then chat jumped. Of course it did. Kieverdam, hello. Eric Grunstadter, hello. Nothing for you here, hello. Chicago Mike, hello. That one servant of Satania, hello. Aether Toast, hello. Evil One, hello. Zao Blay, hello. Elish Norn, hello. Mike R, hello. Chris R, hello. Mike R, Chris R, any relation? Anyway, Twisted Skipster, hello. Trucking with a Tablet, hello. James Von Maxwell, hello. Deco, hello. Frosted Glass, hello. Senkiko, hello. Graph Spree, hello. Atheist Icon, hello. Pinkalo, the Driving Ape Man, hello. And thank you so much for the Combat Hippo. Appreciate it. Faithless, hello. James Garness, hello. And Mike R says, no, there's no relation. Are you sure? How do you know? Have you checked? Have you done the 23andMe yet? I mean, it's possible. It's not impossible. You never know. Maybe you've got a common relative in Charlemagne. Just a guess. Sar Jim, hello. Stig Helmer, hello. All right, guys. Well, first off, in order to fully participate with today's TEDx, the new feature, as provided by Frosted Glass, be sure to send Frosted Glass some love in the chat. Frosted Glass, before I could get to it, has created the TEDx bingo card. Now, in order to get your copy of the TEDx bingo card, you will have to go to my Twitter right now. I will eventually try to post a link to an image or something in the description and in the future, but right now I'm doing it kind of catch as catch can because I'm first time doing it. But go to my Twitter, check out the announcement of this TEDx stream. I've tweeted it out and retweeted it a couple times. And there is a secondary tweet to that announcement that has the image of the bingo card. So if you download that yourself and have that at the ready in a paint program or something, you and I together can go along and see if we can fill out the bingo card. Now, I've looked over some of the categories on the bingo card, and some of them are a little subjective. Okay? So as we come across possible entries into it, we'll discuss briefly, and you can decide to mark it if you think so or not if you don't. We'll see. This is the first time out, so we'll see what happens. Let's see. And Jay Mizzle, hello. Check your logic, hello. All right. So what are our categories on the bingo card, just for reference sake? In no particular order, because it kind of doesn't matter, except for the sake of filling out the card. I guess I should say, what happens if you get a bingo? Well, if you get a bingo, we all get a bingo. So everybody wins in TEDx bingo. But anyway, our categories are plays the victim, mentioning the school to prison pipeline, bringing up or saying white supremacy, mentioning or making use of a childhood or family anecdote in their presentation, the concept or mention of microaggressions, the concept or mention of colonialism, takes credit for something done by others in their demographic. That's also a good one. Attempts to coin a new buzzword, and I'll modify that slightly to buzz phrase, as white fragility is more than one word, but you know what I mean. Mentions Robin DiAngelo, mentions or makes use of rape culture, uses the word toxic in some way, shape, or form, presents an anecdote that probably never happened. That's a subjective one. We'll take those on as they come. There's a free space with Dogcat Fox waving at everyone. Hi, Dogcat Fox. Leaves out vital context. Now, I would also say that would include the, as I've said many times before, the God of the Gaps theory of statistics. The God of the Gaps theory of statistical analysis, as in they present, here's disparity. I'll let you come up with the reasons, that kind of thing. So that's always a good one. Speakers should not be in current occupation or position. Okay, well, that assumes that we know from the speech who they are or what they do. If they don't present themselves as a particular profession, I usually don't make that part of my critique, unless, if they say they're a doctor, okay, doctor of what? If they bring up their career, okay. Again, a little bit subjective, but we'll see. Bell hooks. Now, bell hooks is rarely ever brought up. I think Frosted Glass put that in there just from the most recent TEDx talk. So, bell hooks, and I may change this myself, but for now, bell hooks or feminism, because feminism's not on the card. So I will say the bell hooks can count also as feminism if that's brought up. Privilege, the word, the concept, makes something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. All right, little subjective, but we'll see. Wage gap, of course. Patriarchy, of course. Makes a racist comment. Well, now that is, again, subjective depending on how we go, but we'll see. Word salad. That's always a good one. Also a little bit subjective, but sometimes not so much. Baffles or triggers scribe in the first 30 seconds. Yes, that occurred, or whatever in the previous TEDx talk with the self-justice thing, or decolonizing yourself justice for a decolonized self. Was that it? That was it. Cultural appropriation, I'm assuming bringing up the concept or maybe even performing it, we'll see. And lastly, gratuitous pausing for effect. Yes, if there's a long emotional. Now, again, that's subjective depending on the subject matter. It could be legitimate. If someone, comes up with or if there's it has to be intentional. It can't be like a technical problem or they're waiting for a slide to come up. It has to be that they dramatically just sort of look down and swallow non-existent tears or something. But anyway, guys, that is the first round of TEDx Bingo. We'll take a look at that as we go. All right, so per usual, I'm going to start. Oh, it's 21 minutes and 32 seconds. My bad. I thought it was just under 21 minutes. Well, best I start now. So give a couple seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me you can make it. You can make it. You can hear it all right. I haven't even started drinking yet. And here we go. Okay, just because we have two speakers and I don't know where they're going to go. Did you hear the applause, guys? Have you heard the applause? Then we will proceed. Let's see. Faithless says, make it racially charged statement. Again, that's a little bit subjective, but we'll see. Eva One says, yes, sounds good. Says Chicago Mike. Mike R says, sounds good. Yeah. All right. So this is in, I'm assuming, San Luis Obispo, California. Let's dive in.
We live in polarizing times.
Yes.
In many ways, this polarization is fueled by the tribes we are born into, the expectations that society places upon us, the ways we come to identify ourselves.
Tribes, what society does, identify ourselves. Okay, well, we're framing where we're going before we begin. And, I'm going to pay attention to the video, guys. I'm not going to have a chance to look at the chat too much. So if I miss a bingo thing, apologies, but be sure to fill it out on your own too. All right.
For instance, my name is James,
yes.
Cisgender, heterosexual, biracial male who socially identifies as Black in most instances.
Oh, is that within the first 30 seconds? Yes, it is. That's 26 seconds in. 26 seconds in, I am going to say, because I'm the arbiter of such, that we are now baffles or, I don't like the word, but for the lack of a better word, triggers scribe in the first 30 seconds. We've got personal pronouns and identifies and blah, blah. So there you go, guys. Our first bingo entry, bottom center. Here we go.
And I'm Courtney. I am a female-identified, cisgendered white person. I was raised East Coast upper class. Now I'm a West Coast high school teacher.
Great. So you're a high school teacher. All right. Well, I don't think the first guy mentioned what his occupation is, but all right, we have an educator. Good to know.
And these layers of identity do allow us to see and be seen by one another more clearly.
Really? Really? So you, because of these arbitrary characteristics that you have either observed purely on the basis of sight or have had told to you, which, by the way, a phrase I use far too often, are not determinative of the character of a person, you see them more clearly. Okay. All right.
At the same time, every point of distinction between us creates the potential for misunderstanding.
In many ways, our particular identity markers make us standing up here together in front of you all the more improbable.
Really? Why is that? Why is it improbable?
But James and I have a powerful experience of working together, and we'd like to share some of what we've learned with you about how to collaborate across social difference.
Oh, okay. Social difference. Well, I have no idea what their relationship is or where they started out as. Let's see. Plays victim, no school. I think so far. Yeah, I don't see anything so far. Nothing that applies elsewise. Okay, I can't pause every time I think there's going to be a bingo thing, guys. So we'll work through, and I'll mark them as we go. And back to the video. Uh-oh, did I just turn off the video? No, I didn't. Okay, good.
Ultimately, we'd like to show you how this collaboration was transformative, especially in moving us towards the kind of equity that benefits everyone. First, we'll tell you how we came to meet each other. It's a story of proximity, even though our origins seem quite distant.
Wait. Like it's so improbable that we'd be up on the stage together because of our, because of what? Because of your identification? Because of your identifying markers? Like, why does that mean an inherent distance? But okay, we need the story here. It's going to be an anecdote. It's not a child. Well, I don't know what kind of anecdote it is yet. If they're talking about how they met, I'm assuming they met in adulthood, so it might not apply.
As you will see, Courtney and I come from different points on the spectrum from privilege to marginalization.
Do you? Do you? Because for all I know, based only on what you've said so far, the man here could be a billionaire and she's a high school teacher. So am I to assume, well, no, I am meant to assume. I'm meant to assume immediately that simply on the basis of visual cues, skin color, gender, sexual orientation, and or expression between these two people who've told us nothing else about themselves except for the lady said she's a high school teacher and that she came from a East Coast family or something. Aside from those things, I'm to assume that one of you is marginalized and the other one isn't? Wow, that's, I don't know. Does that count as a racist, a racially charged comment? I don't know. I guess we'll see. I'm not going to say so yet.
Growing up, we were asking similar questions about where we belonged, why we mattered, but due to our respective socioeconomic backgrounds, we were getting quite different responses. Okay,
socioeconomic background. So are we just talking about class? Because how am I to assume your class by looking at you?
I was the statistic. By the time I was 12 years old, my family bought our first home in Ferguson, Missouri. We'd already moved 5 times prior. I'd been in 3 different schools, at least once because of desegregation. I acclimated increasingly worse at every juncture.
Okay.
By the time we purchased our home in Ferguson, Missouri, I was the quintessential teenage bundle of insecurity and anxiety.
Which, of course, happens to no other teenager, regardless of their class or race or gender, of course. Of course!
I began acting out.
Okay, well, this is a childhood anecdote. So, childhood anecdote. There we go. We got 2 on the board for sure, at least by my estimation. All right, moving on.
At home, in school, and in the neighborhood. My every act of rebellion was met with punishment. Grounded at home.
Imagine that. Every act of rebellion was met with punishment. Is that uncommon? I mean, especially when you're a kid, and I assume a rebellion against your parents or elders or something. And punishment can be a lot of things, but okay, sure. Sounds completely not unique so far.
Suspensions at school. And as for the neighborhood, let me just say, Ferguson Police Department did not seem to see a young man struggling to find his way. They saw a young black male and all the threats and fears our society has assigned to that identity.
Assuming a distance of time in the past, given the speaker's age or apparent age, and again, I don't know, but I'll assume he's not off base in racial tensions being even worse back then when he was a kid than they may be now. Okay, granted.
I internalized that identity and acted accordingly.
What does that mean?
By the time I was 24, I was unemployed, homeless, and when a friend of mine
Wait, you became unemployed and homeless because you internalized what you thought the cops saw you as? Okay.
Offered to use his connections to get me into Lincoln University, a historically black college in Jefferson City. I rejected the opportunity.
Oh, so you made a choice. Okay.
Didn't fit my image of who I was.
Okay.
No way I would fit in.
Okay, so over the course of your life from childhood up through college age, you made a progressively lousy series of decisions for yourself. Okay.
I was a thug, a criminal, a hustler. I didn't
by circumstance or by choice?
I didn't belong on a college campus. I belonged in the streets.
If you say so.
I grew up in a predominantly white suburb, pretty oblivious to race and class. My parents had organized their lives so I could have the best possible education.
Oh, and how dare they?
By the time I was in high school, I was attending an expensive private boarding school and then Harvard College.
And you should feel terrible about that every day of your life.
But even in those privileged places, I made my fair share of bad choices.
Really?
I broke some serious school rules, and once after a college road trip, a speeding ticket I failed to pay in Nevada turned into a warrant for my arrest.
Oh my God!
But every one of my mistakes was met by the same positive affirmation by the adults around me.
Really? A warrant for your arrest is positive affirmation? You're some kind of legal masochist then, I suppose.
All said, "We know you're better than this." And I believe them.
Okay. Well, is that anything like what our first speaker's friend was trying to do by saying, hey, I can get you into college because, at least in the abstract, he knew that our speaker was better than where he was at, and our speaker chose to go the other direction? I mean, don't get me wrong. Everybody's family is different. Some people have very supportive families. Some people have very not supportive families. Some people come from relatively safe environments. Other people come from not safe environments and so on. But, okay.
Earlier, I told you I was the statistic.
Yeah.
That's what we call the 1 in 4 young black men who wind up in prison.
Is that true? I honestly don't know. Do 25% of all black men in America end up in prison? I honestly, and I'm not being facetious, I have no idea if that's an actual statistic or not.
It was there in California State Prison that the beliefs about who I was began to crack and ultimately splinter.
Oh, you were in prison? For what?
2006, I took a class that explored the link between childhood trauma and criminalized behavior.
Oh, okay. He hasn't said it yet, but that's close to the school to prison pipeline.
It was that class and a later class on restorative justice that taught me that we all have common experiences, that I individually had agency.
Restorative justice, not on the bingo board, but maybe it should be.
Restorative justice, they used a profound analogy.
Okay.
Society is like a spider web.
Uh-huh.
And every strand you touch causes all of the others to tremble.
Okay.
It meant that I could never be disconnected from society. Every action I took would affect others either positively or negatively.
Not necessarily. But, okay.
Growing up, I'd felt increasingly disconnected from society.
Mm-hmm.
I now realize I could never be disconnected. My every action would impact others. Just as importantly, theirs would affect me.
Well, except for, like, just as a broad example, if I hadn't chosen this TEDx talk to review today, then my entire audience would never have heard of it, never have watched it, and honestly, probably never even knew that either of these two people existed. So his actions wouldn't have affected anybody, either in the chat room or myself. Not everybody. You're not the center of the universe. I mean, the people you interact with or do things unto, sure, certainly, but not society at large, unless you're doing something catastrophic. I know I'm being a nitpicker, but that's just how I am.
So as James was making his way to that restorative justice class, I was moving into a career as a teacher. And that was a pretty comfortable space for me for a long time.
Oh, Humble Clay says leaves out vital context. Well, he didn't say why he was in prison, but I'm gonna wait and see if that comes up, because maybe that's part of the story later. You know, some things you have to build up to, and so I'm not gonna quite give it that quite yet.
And then came 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I've been following the news coverage of police killing young Black men.
Well, now this was filmed, I think, last year, so how timely, I suppose.
When Michael Brown, an 18-year-old high school graduate, was murdered by a Ferguson police officer.
No, Michael Brown attacked a police officer, went for the guy's gun, and the police officer fired in self-defense. It wasn't murder. Sorry, hate to tell you that. I know that we're like 5 or 6 years outside of that event and all the investigation and all the evidence and all the testimony and so on, but no.
And his body was left bare on the street for over 4 hours. I was horrified.
Okay.
Then came the news that there would be no indictment of the police officer who had killed Michael Brown.
And why was that? Why was that? Might I ask?
And I watched as Ferguson erupted in pain. And I watched as...
Erupted in pain? You mean rioted? I mean, we have to make the distinction between people who are protesting peacefully, but Ferguson is more marked by the riots, the arsons, the destruction, the shootings, and everything else that occurred. Erupted in pain. If you're going to sugarcoat reality, we're not going to get very far.
Friends of mine, particularly friends of color, were devastated.
Uh-huh.
The majority of my community, however, remained intact, and I didn't feel any less safe on the streets of my city.
Wait, you didn't feel any less safe, even though your community remained intact? I don't know what community you were in at the time. Maybe she mentioned, but I forgot. Was your community undergoing riots? Why would you feel... I'm confused.
Because of my race and status, powerful institutions continue to protect me.
Okay, thank you, Pakal, the Driving Ape Man. These two really love the word Ferguson. That's 13. Oh, you're keeping account? All right. Well, whatever floats your boat. Now let's see. Oh, and thank you, Manic. Dogcat Fox. Hiya. Hiya, Manic. Let's see. Makes rate privilege. Well, she mentioned privilege, so privilege gets a circle. And I'll show my completed card by the time we get to the end of the thing. Let's do a review here. Plays victim? No, not yet. School to prison pipeline? Alluded to it, but not quite. White supremacy? No. Microaggressions? No. Colonialism? No. Credit for something done by others? No. Attempt to coin a new buzzword? No. Ramen? No. Toxic. Anecdote that probably never happened? Not so far. Leaves out vital context. It's iffy, but we'll see. Speakers should not be incurring occupation? Hasn't seen that. Bell hooks or feminism? No. Wage gap, patriarchy, racist comment. That's sitting on the edge with her and him sort of assuming or presuming to the audience that because of what they are inherently, they will experience these things or won't experience those things. Cultural appropriation, gratuitous pausing for effect. Not quite. Okay.
My job, the police, my elected officials.
So the police don't protect not white, well-off people? Elected officials aren't there to represent non-white, non-well-off people? Teachers are not... Okay, we're getting close to maybe just being a racist statement at this point.
And yet the same was not true for all of my friends. How was it that we could occupy the same spaces and have such different experiences?
Such as?
Why weren't those institutions protecting them?
I'll need some examples, please.
So I tried to understand the bigger picture. Studying police brutality led me to see the larger injustice in our legal system.
Okay.
And I came to understand how that injustice has led to millions of Americans incarcerated for decades.
Unjustly? Millions of Americans are incarcerated for decades unjustly? Now, if you're going to talk about like the 3 strikes you're out or mandatory minimums and things like that, we could have a conversation. But just saying that broadly and just saying like, oh, everybody who's in jail shouldn't be inherently, and we're going back to the restorative justice stuff, aren't we?
And then I really had to ask, what was my responsibility in light of this new awareness?
Well, are you an elected official? Are you a prison official? Are you a law enforcement officer? Are you a criminal yourself? Well, I suppose voting, mostly.
I reflected on my resources, and after some internet research...
Well, after doing some Googling...
I found a program that offers a free college education to people incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison.
Okay.
That's where I met James.
Okay. Wait, so he was in San Quentin? I'm so curious to know for what. Not that it's necessarily, the end-all be-all, but I am curious.
2015, constitutional lawyer Brian Stevenson gave a talk at San Quentin to non-incarcerated teachers and incarcerated students. He spoke of his own experiences of getting proximate to people on death row and the insights he'd gained as a result.
Getting approximate? You mean meeting people? Getting approximate. It's such an odd word, like approximate. So he met with people on death row. He spoke to people on death row. Why can't you just say meeting or speaking? Well, why approximate?
Meanwhile, people in the audience reflected on their own relationships to privilege and marginalization.
Sitting in that audience was pretty far from my college experience, and it was also an experience of proximity.
What does that mean? What do you mean when you say proximity? And I know, I define your terms. Define what you mean by proximity, please. Are you going to define that? Will you? Maybe that should be a bingo space. Like, bring up a term and not define it.
On one side of me sat Otter. On the other sat Solo, 2 diligent students who'd been incarcerated for much of their lives.
Otter and Solo. So you were close to them in a physical sense? Like you sat next to them. Is that proximity? Is that what that means?
We were all moved, bound by our shared awe at Brian Stevenson's work and at his call to action.
Wow, Brian Stevenson. Yeah, no, I remember Brian Stevenson.
In the years that followed, proximity led to partnership.
What? So you met people and then your relationship developed. Why use the word proximity? Why? Seriously, what is the allure of just switching out terms? I don't get it.
Solo and I co-wrote a paper, and we presented it together at an academic conference at San Quentin.
Okay.
I collaborated alongside several incarcerated teaching assistants, one of whom stands right here in front of you.
Okay, and we can't see the photos that they're putting up on the screen because for whatever reason they decided not to actually include those, so there may be context provided to some of this stuff in photographs, but we, the audience, are not allowed to see it. So I don't know.
on revising a college prep course. And I realized that in each of these collaborations, the quality of our shared efforts was far higher than anything we could have come up with on our own.
Okay.
And yet, I could sense in myself that it was difficult for me to back away in those partnerships from my own power and privilege.
Why is that? Why was it difficult to, quote unquote, back away from your power and privilege? Was it because you were a law-abiding citizen who hadn't had their rights curtailed by injuring other people's? Maybe that was it. You know, you got somebody who's in prison for having committed a crime and violated the rules and laws of society versus someone who hasn't. Is that why you couldn't back away from reality?
One powerful experience I had with proximity occurred when I took a 12-week-long workshop at San Quentin on criminal justice reform. When I got the syllabus, I was excited to see one guest lecturer would be one of the foremost reform advocates in the state.
Imagine that.
The day he arrived, my excitement only grew when he said he'd be open to hearing our reform ideas.
Wow.
This was a person who's been consulted by governors and who has successfully passed statewide ballot initiatives that has led to the release of thousands of people.
Okay.
During the class,
for what?
He spoke about the powerful influence that proximity had upon his own work.
Proximity, getting to know people, right? Getting to know people. That's what you're talking about. Meeting people, socializing. Proximity. It sounds so clinical and technical and possibly pseudo-academic, but is that why it sounds so fancy? Proximity. I got some proximity, yo. Sounds like some kind of drug or something. I got proximity.
He said that cultivating relationships with currently and formerly incarcerated students.
Cultivating relationships? I'm sorry, do you mean proximity?
Had given him the credibility needed to make him an influential reformer. Admittedly, his understanding of the beliefs or the benefits of proximity was misguided.
Okay.
He spoke of gaining credibility, not insight.
Gaining credibility, not insight. I don't even know what you guys are talking about at this point. You got to get more specific. We're getting close to a no context bingo cue.
He then proceeded to shoot down every idea we proposed.
Because they were bad? Or because he was not the foremost expert on reform and had not ended up putting forth legislation that ended up releasing a bunch of people? So he disagreed with you, therefore what?
As the class progressed, it became evident he did not value our experiences.
Or your experiences hold no value. I mean, it's one or the other, right? Okay, it became clear to you. All right.
This was a person who successfully helped free thousands of people.
And so maybe he knows more about stuff than you do?
I believe, had he been willing to listen to those he was helping, he could have freed tens of thousands.
You believe? Okay, and this one guy, well, I mean, then, hey, you're not in prison anymore. You know what he did, right, to free all those people. And you also know what he would not listen to free more. So you have the recipe to free thousands and thousands of people, right? I mean, let me take you at your word that this guy was just completely tone deaf. He done a lot of good, but he was unwilling to move on your brilliant ideas and insight. Okay, well, you have all the components necessary to do better than he did. Now, are you going to tell us, and I don't know, maybe you are you going to tell us that you've come up with a plan to find a way to release tens of thousands of people from prison who are there unjustly? I'm happy to hear it. Is that what you're going to tell us?
My takeaway was that proximity is indeed vital, but something more is needed.
Okay. Proximity. Our lady speaker said just simply sitting next to guys in an audience gave her proximity. Now you're saying that proximity is both listening to and apparently accepting without challenge ideas voiced by someone else. So even though this guy had done a whole bunch of stuff to free a whole bunch of people and change the law and reform criminal justice, he didn't have proximity because he didn't think your ideas were of value. What is it? Are we talking literal, physical proximity? Are we talking about, I must believe what you say or you're not practicing proximity? I think we're getting close to a no context or not defining a word bingo here, because it's coming pretty close.
Proximity alone does not address the privilege and the marginalization we bring to every relationship we form in order to affect change.
Whoa, okay. That might be word salad. I'm backing up a little bit. I just want to hear that one more time.
But something more is needed. Proximity alone does not address the privilege and the marginalization we bring to every relationship we form in order to affect change.
I'm going to call that word salad. I have no idea what the heck that's supposed to mean. It's just a bunch of words together, and he hasn't defined his terms. What does proximity mean? So yeah, word salad.
The ways we internalize privilege and marginalization get in the way of true collaboration.
Additional word salad.
So as you can see, James and I had to make quite a journey to get to a place where we could meet.
Like the journey of serving out his prison sentence?
And where we could recognize the value in ourselves and each other, and the potential in a collaboration between us.
Okay.
While I was still incarcerated, Courtney asked me to co-design a high school class called Voices of Incarceration.
A high school class, Voices of Incarceration. Okay.
Though the limitations of proximity were still present for me, one of the things that interested me most was that this class would give me the opportunity to present students with the first-person perspective of the impact mass criminalization is having upon millions of families in this country.
Mass criminalization. Okay, another abstract term, which I am assuming, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, will not be defined or further explained as we proceed. Just accept it as true because I said it.
At first, I didn't quite anticipate how powerfully James's involvement would expose my own blind spots.
Okay.
For example, in our very first meeting, James gently noted.
So all of our narratives are coming from incarcerated communities, which is great.
Okay.
What about the survivors of harm? And what if we use the restorative framework?
Okay. All right. I'm trying to be generous here. All right. So you're going to not just dwell on the perspectives and or opinions and or interpretations of those incarcerated. You are going to work in the victims, the families of victims, and so on. I mean, maybe it's not restorative justice, but if insofar as a high school class or an educational context, then yes, not simply putting all the weight of credibility onto the incarcerated when it comes to criminal justice would be a good idea. Again, I'm trying to be generous here.
To be honest, I didn't really know what that meant at all.
You didn't know what that meant at all. Getting input from victims of crime in addition to the perspective of those who are incarcerated. You didn't know what that meant at all. We're getting close to someone who maybe shouldn't be in the occupation they're in, but I withhold judgment.
Until James explained.
Oh, okay.
He described how we could center the stories of all those caught in the web of incarceration.
All those caught in the web of incarceration. Whoa. And maybe she'll clarify, but just that statement alone. Victims are not caught in the web of incarceration. Okay. Those who commit crimes are caught in the quote-unquote web of incarceration. Victims are victims of those who are incarcerated. I mean, depending on the circumstances and the crime committed, they may be caught in a web of grief or a web of trauma or a web of God knows what. But they're not caught in the web of incarceration. They can easily forget and dismiss those who are incarcerated as unnecessary to the rest of their existence, if they so choose, because they're the victims. I know I went off on a bit of rant there, and I don't know what's coming next, but that was my reflex reaction.
Survivors of harm, district attorneys, family members, even correctional officers.
Victims of harm are the only ones you mentioned there who are not inherently or mandatorily, is mandatorily a word? I don't know, but it is for me now, caught in the web of incarceration. They are the victims. Prosecutors have to deal with the criminal justice system as a matter of course. Prison guards and staff have to deal with the criminal justice system as a matter of course. The victims are completely entitled to distance themselves as much as possible from the process if they so choose. They have nothing to do with the web of incarceration, save for maybe petitioning the judge either for leniency or throwing the book at somebody, depending on the circumstances. What do you... Okay.
This was just the first of many transformative moments when James's expertise reshaped the course.
James's expertise from being a criminal and incarcerated? I guess, I suppose you can become an expert at being incarcerated. That's not a very positive statement, but okay.
Into this collaboration, I had questions about Courtney's privilege.
All right. What are your questions about Courtney's privilege? That she obviously, just by looking at her, she has inherently because, yeah.
But collaborating with Courtney taught me that privilege is relative.
Oh!
As we entered the subject of understanding and reforming the legal system,
yeah,
it was my experiences and the relationships that I'd built that became a strength in our collaboration. At the same time, we relied heavily upon Courtney's pedagogical skills, her knowledge of current media projects on legal reform, and her experience developing curricula.
What does that have to do with privilege is relative? And also, if privilege is relative, is it still privilege?
So through James's contacts and my access to email, we...
I'm sorry, access to email? I mean, okay, I'll admit, your access to the internet in prison, depending on the circumstances, probably very curtailed. All right, sorry. And of course, email is a privilege, except for those who have committed crimes that separate them from society because they don't get to deserve or enjoy the same privileges as everybody else because they've harmed society. Is that an injustice in and of itself? Golly, I don't know.
We were able to invite an incredible array of guest speakers. And we hoped that these visitors would help our students see the humanity of incarcerated people.
Okay, well, certainly. You know, somebody in prison is not suddenly not human. And that's why we have laws that, as best as they can, sometimes inadequate, depending on the situation, still recognize the inherent human rights of individuals, even those incarcerated. So, all right, on that point, I won't disagree. Thank you, Toxic Nightshade. Just wanted to say thank you for being on YouTube. Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate it. I hope whatever I do, either now or in the past or in the future, is useful to somebody for something.
We also hoped that they might help reveal how power can seduce other people into losing their humanity.
Power can seduce other people into losing their humanity. Well, I mean, if you want to read Machiavelli's The Prince, you can learn very quickly how power the attainment of it, the craving of it, or the lack of it, and the wanting of it, can lead someone to divest themselves of their moral boundaries. That's not exactly a new concept. But, I mean, if you're talking to high school students, then I suppose maybe they haven't quite considered that yet, unless they themselves are sociopaths of some kind. And certainly there are no sociopaths in high school. I didn't meet any along the way or anything.
Through intense in-person conversations, we hoped our students would come to understand the problems and the complexities of the legal system.
Intense conversation? You mean proximity? Oh, wait, no, we haven't defined what proximity means because it's meant 5 or 6 different things so far.
Courtney had resources. I had extensive experience with the legal system. The question was, could we value both of those assets equally? And would gatekeepers on both sides be willing to sign off on our project?
Okay, so would the prison officials allow you to participate, and would her supervisors at the school allow her to work with at the time, I'm guessing, I don't know, I'm still a little vague on this. Was he still in prison at that time? And his experience with the legal system, I mean, it's not the kind of experience you want to necessarily have, but again, I don't know what he was in prison for. I don't know how long he was in prison for. I don't know anything about how many appeals he filed or how much work he did or study he did in school. He talked about going to presentations. He talked about taking classes and so on. So, okay.
Lucky for us, they did. But one moment in the class showed us that even transformative collaboration can be plagued by some of the same obstacles as proximity.
What is proximity? You have not defined what that is. It has been variously said thus far, either sitting next to somebody in an audience or accepting someone's ideas or proposals without question. What is proximity?
A few weeks into the course,
you know what? Okay, at this point, I don't care if they give us a dictionary definition of their own version at the end of this thing. Where's the context one? Oh, does this count as an attempt to coin a new buzzword? Because I've heard it's not a new buzzword. It really isn't. But leaves out vital context. I'm circling leaves out vital context. We've gone too far at this point. They've gone more than halfway through this deal, and they have not defined proximity. So leaves out vital context. Thank you, Mr. Scott. J87, press X if you think James is proximating her. I don't want to make assumptions about what goes on behind the scenes, but we'll move on.
I brought our students on a field trip to San Quentin.
Oh, that must have been like an episode of Scared Straight.
You probably didn't know you can go to prison on a field trip.
Actually, I did, but whatever.
Our purpose in bringing the students inside was twofold. One, we wanted them to understand the role of correctional officers from a first-person perspective.
Okay.
And two, we wanted them to engage with people who are currently incarcerated, including James.
You mean have proximity to those incarcerated? I mean, why won't you use that term, at least in instances where you've previously used it? Right? I mean, sitting next to someone in an audience gave you proximity. Why wouldn't you say you want your students to gain proximity to incarcerated people? Why? Either it means what you say it means or it doesn't. Come on.
Before the tour began, we, the tour guides, met the students in the chapel where we introduced ourselves.
Okay.
Before long, the students grew comfortable and asked question after question about our daily routines.
Okay.
When our students asked what life was like in prison, They were greeted by upbeat descriptions of the self-help programs, of the thousands of outside volunteers who come inside, and of San Quentin as a totally different kind of prison.
And were they shielded from the reality of, I'm sitting in a cell most of my day and I'm deprived of my family and freedom and everything else because of the crimes I committed? Any of that in there?
This was my first tour, and I was alongside several tour guides who seemed to have been chosen for their appreciation for the benefits of San Quentin.
And then you proceeded to scare straight the students and not put a rosy tinge onto everything about prison by making it sound like, I don't know, Club Med or something, or a sabbatical spa, right? You dose them with some reality, I hope.
To be fair, rehabilitative aspects of the prison are highly visible. Less visible are the mechanisms of state violence and control that the rehabilitation is immersed in.
Okay, so the prison is a place where people have opportunities to improve themselves, but at the same time, everybody there is inherently a victim. Is that what I am to what I meant to understand from that series of clarifications? Because that's what I'm hearing. Are you going to tell us that you told the students not to commit crimes?
I mean, students could see the gun tower, but it probably has a different significance when you know you will not be a target.
Yes, it does. You know why that is? Because people who aren't criminals don't have to fear the gun tower. There's a very clear separation between those who have to worry about trying to leave a prison and those that don't. It's called criminals and non-criminals. When are you going to get to the part where you educated the students and discouraged them from going down the wrong path in life and making choices that might lead them to your own fate? Or is it just going to be the prison has great educational programs, but also we're victims of state violence with a guard tower to keep criminals from escaping into society, which they have already harmed?
In fact, the gun towers are a strong illustration of how the violence from the state is visible for some, but invisible for others.
I feel like I'm just going to repeat myself if I comment on that. So if you're listening to this in the future, rewind 30 seconds, listen to what I just said, and then jump forward 30 seconds, and you'll have my thoughts.
If I'm being candid, this contradiction produced a moment for me.
Oh, this contradiction. Contradiction. Really? It's a contradiction that people who are imprisoned have to worry about guard towers if they attempt to escape versus those who are not imprisoned not worrying about guard towers if they attempt to quote unquote escape or just leave and go back to their homes because they're law-abiding citizens and didn't harm anybody in the process of living in society. Oh, tell us about this contradiction.
I was no longer the co-creator of a class critiquing prison. I was now the tour guide on a tour exemplifying the glories of rehabilitative prisons.
Okay.
A different moment sticks with me.
Is that a overdramatic pause? Gratuitous pausing? It's not gratuitous so far.
We're looking out over San Quentin's baseball field, and a lieutenant asked one of the incarcerated tour guides to stand very close to one of our students.
Incarcerated tour guides? You mean prisoners? Interesting choices of verbiage here when we're talking verbiage. Verbiage? Anyway, proximity without definition, incarcerated tour guides, not prisoners.
And the officer says, so you really think we should give this criminal a baseball bat?
I don't know. Should you?
And I look over and I can see the uncertainty in our student's face as he surveys this tattooed, heavily muscled person in front of him.
Yeah, well, given the environment, given the, I'm assuming, uncertainty of exactly why this guy is in prison, because so far you haven't said anything about discouraging kids from acting like you did in your youth or otherwise to put you there, why wouldn't they be scared?
And I can hear the wobble in his voice as he says, yeah, give him a baseball bat. There we were, the officer exercising his customary power and inviting us to share in it.
His customary power? You mean mandated authority?
At the same time, the officer was reinforcing the narrative of incarcerated people as dangerous and other.
Incarcerated people are, at least in the abstract, dangerous. And they are other because they have done or committed actions that have separated themselves from law-abiding, civilized society. Now, depending on their crime, it may be something very light. It may be something very serious. Without knowing the full and honest history of each individual, you can't necessarily make that assessment. But the criminal justice system, for all of its brilliance and all of its flaws, has found that person necessarily incarcerated in San Quentin. You can assume safely and without judgment from any reasonable person that the people in there are dangerous to one degree or another because they're in prison. And the guards are not in prison, they work at a prison, and they themselves are not criminals, unlike their charges.
There I was again, inside a powerful institution, working hard to protect me, and now to protect our students.
You put them there. You wanted to take them to a prison. This was your project and your choice. If you are not accepting of the risks of that choice, if you're suddenly shocked in the middle of this project that you are in a prison with violent and potentially dangerous felons, I don't know what to tell you, lady, but you got everything that you asked for. And the prison guards, are you going to at all entertain the lived experiences of the prison guards of San Quentin? And why? Just why their lived experiences might inform them to maintain a certain level of caution when it comes to handing implements of destruction to prisoners. Have you no empathy for them, oh high school teacher of virtue?
And in that moment, Courtney and I couldn't opt out. We couldn't exchange notes on what we were experiencing. We couldn't engage with the students about what they were noticing. We couldn't even exchange a knowing look for fear of how that might be read by the prison guards.
Yeah, golly gee whiz. I wonder why prison guards are so alert and vigilant. Obviously, it's all completely nonsense and unjustified in San Quentin.
Neither of us recognized ahead of time just how limiting our collaboration could be, even in the midst of this powerful experience of proximity.
Neither of you realized that there would be restrictions and cautions and uncertainties about bringing in a bunch of high school students to go on a tour of San Quentin with convicted felons. Neither of you could have thought of this. Neither of you could have foreseen it. Neither of you, in your grand design, sought to, I don't know, consult with the prison authorities first on what would be and what would not be allowed, what would be and would not be a danger point in touring the prison? Really? Okay, if you say so.
We realize that transformative collaboration still leaves us susceptible to institutional power.
Susceptible. You are in a prison. You are a convicted felon, a prisoner therein, if I'm understanding the context correctly, along with other prisoners. You're not susceptible to institutional power. You are captive to it because you committed crimes. You are beholden to it because you are a prisoner. You forfeited your rights to complain about the punishments levied upon you by society when you are incarcerated, and specifically when you committed the crime. You're not susceptible. You are paying your debt to society. And the students there were not susceptible. They were guests in a dangerous environment. What? Okay.
But unlike proximity, where the power dynamics remain static.
But what is, no. Unlike proximity, where the power dynamics remain static. Okay, so is this the definition? Proximity is power dynamics are static. Is that what proximity means? Because if proximity means power dynamics are static, then you have no room to complain about the criminal justice reform expert dismissing your ideas. Because if the power dynamics are static, he is the expert and you're just the audience, and those are static, they don't change, then that's proximity if he rejects your ideas. But no, you said that that guy would not accept proximity. He would not entertain proximity. So which is it?
Our partnership meant that we could not only leverage our own power and privilege, but also craft a more comprehensive narrative that would then produce its own leverage.
Okay, you know what? Okay, new buzzword. This is as close to a new buzzword because it is a moving target as to what it means. Attempt to coin a new buzzword. I've heard proximity before. I don't know that I've ever heard it said or quote unquote defined this much in any TEDx talk prior to this. That's covered too. So attempt to coin a new buzzword, proximity. And just for the sake of argument, I'm also going to take over the free space because I hadn't already done that. So Dog, Cat, Fox. Okay, we are 2 away from bingo on the D line of TEDx or the N line of bingo. We haven't had white supremacy yet. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. I don't think we've had a no reason yet. I mean, whether you think that their reason is justified or not is outside the scope of that. But for no reason, we haven't had that yet, as far as I can tell. And white supremacy has not been mentioned yet. So, all right.
A few weeks after the tour, we were still shadowed by worries that our students wanted to turn every prison into a version of San Quentin, instead of questioning the root causes of mass criminalization.
Haven't defined mass criminalization. The guy in the previous TEDx talk, at least he gave a certain definition to what he meant when he talked about mass criminalization. He talked about laws and the low bar that some laws have for making someone a criminal. Whether you agree with that or not, at least he went into depth on what he was talking about. Here, nothing. And yeah, not all prisons are like San Quentin, right? You know why that is? Because San Quentin is a very special prison for very special prisoners, like a lot of other high-level prisons in the world. They're there for the most serious of crimes. Yes, every prison is not necessarily the same as every other prison. Wow, is that a revelation? I mean, these are high school students, so maybe they haven't watched a lot of documentaries, but I knew that in high school. I'd heard the term supermax because there are levels and gradations of prisons. I don't know why I'm getting caught on that point, but that's just such a bizarre comment.
And then Jason Samuel visited our classroom.
Who's that?
Jason had only recently been released from prison.
For what?
And he shared with us a powerful story of sitting at his own parole hearing and having the police officer he had almost killed show up.
Uh-huh.
But instead of railing against Jason, the police officer named Tom was so moved by Jason's life story that he decided he wanted to help Jason get out of prison.
Okay, well, that's very benevolent and magnanimous of that police officer. If he was almost killed by this guy, he must have seen something, and I'm not being facetious here, he must have seen something very valuable in this guy, despite the fact that he was almost killed by him under whatever circumstances we're not going to be told, apparently. That is an amazing act of forgiveness on that officer's part that he was not required to undertake, but more power to him.
Jason shared their restorative justice process, sitting across from Tom, a man he had shot and almost killed.
Oh.
And Jason described him.
He shot a police officer, attempted murder of a police officer? Wow. And he's out of jail now? How long did he serve?
Weeping, as Tom offered him forgiveness.
Well, good. And he should have been weeping because that is an amazing gesture by somebody. You know, I'm not going to fault the police officer for that. If he felt the circumstances were such that he could forgive the guy, that's an amazing thing. I'm not going to make fun of it or nothing. So good for him.
Jason told us what that forgiveness meant to him.
Okay.
Not just freedom and a second chance, but the restoration of his faith in humankind.
The restoration of his faith in humankind. So if the officer had not forgiven him, maybe my slightly inebriated brain is catching on that too much, or more so than I should, but it is a little bit.
Jason told us that Tom could forgive me meant that I could forgive everyone who had hurt me.
Really? So if he hadn't forgiven you, again, my brain is catching on something here. I don't know if I can articulate it yet.
My mom, who was addicted to drugs and lost her kids. My dad, who walked out.
Well, oh, you're talking about Jason. You're not talking about yourself. Okay, just, all right.
Even the guy who cuts me off in traffic or bumps me on the sidewalk. And in that moment, our students shifted. It was no longer about the people in prison who needed rehabilitation. It was about everyone, including them. And it was about forgiveness.
Forgiveness is not required. A victim of crime is not required to ever forgive the person who did wrong to them. That is the one thing about quote unquote restorative justice that never seems to link up. It is, at least the model that I've been presented with, it is entirely dependent on the victim or victims or survivors, etc., of a crime choosing to participate. If they don't choose to participate, you're not, and you cannot rationally fault them for that. But apparently, according to our speaker, this guy would never have forgiven anyone anything that was done to him unless the cop forgave him for his crime. Now, this goes back to an anecdote I've repeated several times now, and I'm not going to go fully into it, but just to say that I had the experience of having somebody from my past who did me wrong come up to me unbidden and unsolicited and apologize for their behavior in the past. And because they made the gesture of apology, I forgave them because it was a sincere and unsolicited act of remorse and expression of regret over something they had done wrong. And it was amazing. It was one of the hallmark moments of my life that told me, in that scenario, effectively the victim, that humanity's not completely dead, even in those that I envision or have experiences with that would tell me otherwise. So in that sense, I learned that forgiveness is real and that remorse can be real. But in this dynamic, Jason was the criminal. He doesn't inherently deserve forgiveness. That is a gift that he may be given if the person involved in his crime or the victim of his crime decides to give it. But he can't operate in life expecting to be forgiven, and therefore everybody else doesn't deserve his forgiveness. Now, that doesn't track. That does not track. Either you have it in yourself to forgive people their trespasses because time or circumstances have changed of your own volition. You don't need a trigger of someone else. Well, he forgave me, so I guess I can forgive somebody else. That doesn't... Maybe I'm missing something. I'm happy to be corrected. That doesn't quite track with me.
Jason's story of restorative justice showed that we're all interconnected, whether we're the cop or the person responsible for harm, or even a student visiting a prison.
Okay, Mr. Scott J87 in the chat. Scribelight. Jason Samuel was released in 2017, shot cop Tom Morgan in 1997. How did you... Okay, I'm curious to know how you found that out so quickly. If that is actually the person she's talking about. Did she say the guy's name? Did she say his full name? I just heard Jason. Maybe she said Jason Samuel. If she said Jason Samuel, then okay, that wasn't too hard. But 20 years? Okay, 20 years for attempted murder of a police officer? All right.
We could have never gotten to that moment without the proximity, the trust, and the equity we developed over our journey of collaboration.
Willett Ford, Scribelight, note that a police officer forgiving him for shooting him equates with forgiving someone for cutting him off in traffic. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's right up there. Or mom having an addiction. That kind of thing. Same difference.
So, what is transformative collaboration?
No. I want to know what proximity is. I want to know what mass criminalization is. Okay, anyway.
Well, it's a process for crafting social change, and it begins by bringing disparate partners together in order to cultivate equity. It does require a willingness to be clear-eyed about the power and privilege you bring to the partnership.
Right, so you must first confess your sins of inherent circumstance before you proceed. Okay, what power and privilege does your opposite number here have? Or what does he inherently not have because of the identifiers that you cited at the beginning of this? And am I to assume then that anybody I see on the street with those same identifiers is likewise either privileged or not privileged without having to ask any further questions? Do tell.
And it requires a willingness to leverage that privilege on behalf of the goal and to relinquish some of your power in the partnership.
How do you relinquish your power? How does a white female high school teacher with a well-off background, I guess, relinquish power to or from a convicted and incarcerated criminal? What does that mean? Because you, as the high school teacher, have no power over that person. The state has all the power over that person. And unless you are a prosecutor or a judge or the warden of the prison or prison guard or something, what power do you have in that dynamic that you are giving up? I'm very curious to know. Will she explain? Probably not.
And it requires a willingness to see social issues through a dialectical lens.
What?
Here's what we mean by that.
Yeah, please explain.
I have an argument about how to approach a social problem. It's based on my experience and my social standing in the world and what I see as important and realistic.
Okay.
I bring the same, recognizing that both of our perspectives are valid and valuable.
Uh-huh.
Finally, we do have to synthesize those perspectives.
Uh-huh.
Ultimately, transformative collaboration is restorative. It holds to the principles. It says that though the times are polarizing, we should not be.
Though the times are polarizing, we should not be. Now, let me list off for you the arbitrary characteristics of my physical and or sexual makeup and define for you those as indicators of my inherent class status, privilege status, power status, marginalization status. Oh, by the way, I'm not being polarizing in any of that, just so you know.
And it holds to the principles that we are all interconnected, that our communities are stronger when we note the ways we are situated within this stratified social world and intentionally work to mitigate our complicity.
Okay, if we didn't already have word salad circled, that would be a second instance of word salad circled. Mitigate our complicity. What complicity does the white high school teacher, and I'm only saying white because they make it really important here, what complicity does the white high school teacher have in the black convict being incarcerated? You spent the first 5 minutes of this telling us how your lives could not have been more separated by distance and circumstance and yada, yada, yada. And the choices that our male speaker took in life led him to be incarcerated in San Quentin. How, in any way, shape, or form, is the high school teacher complicit to an extent where she needs to mitigate her complicity? I ask only because they say these things, and I know I'm not going to have any clarity provided.
Transformative collaboration requires that we see our differences as strengths.
Okay. How?
And it requires that we understand that privilege and expertise are not things that some possess and others lack.
They aren't? Privilege and expertise aren't things that some possess and others lack. They're not. So, then it's not either privilege or expertise, is it? I think my brain just broke on that one.
And it requires that we understand the inherent value in every single person, especially those on the margins.
Inherent value in what context? Inherent value is a human life? I guess it depends, you know. Some people don't think that rapists are murderers. I'm going to sneeze 1 second. Okay, sneeze avoided, at least for the recording. The inherent value. I mean, at the core, all human life is precious to one degree or another. Some human lives, depending on your point of view, have forfeited the value of their life, depending on the crime they've committed, since we're talking in that context. I don't know. I've completely lost my train of thought, mainly due to the sneeze and mainly because I don't know what they're talking about anymore.
So what could transformative collaboration look like for you?
I'm still wondering what proximity is supposed to look like for any of us.
And what could it look like in your community?
I don't know. Tell me.
If you're a student that's majoring in engineering,
I'm not.
What would it look like to partner with someone who may be impacted by your invention?
What?
If you're a recently retired couple, how could you engage with a young family that's struggling to stay afloat?
I'm still caught on that first one. I'm an engineering student collaborating with someone who might be impacted by my invention. Does being an engineering student inherently involve inventing something new? Or, oh boy.
And if you're someone that society has deemed to be on the margins, how have you persisted to understand your own true value?
How have you persisted to understand your own true value? Is that a self-esteem argument?
We recognize that our increasingly nuanced identities have value, even as they sometimes can make us feel farther and farther apart.
Your nuanced identities have no value insofar as they determine the kind of person you are. Going off of the litany you each provided at the beginning of this, your gender, your race, your sexual categorization, none of those things say anything about who you are. They carry no weight. They are descriptors. That's it. You can nuance it all you want. It says nothing about your value as a person in society. Your actions do. How you treat others says something about that. How you treat yourself says something about that. Okay.
But if we choose to engage with one another through transformative collaboration, we can not only overcome those differences, we can solve some of the world's problems.
And if we're to build a more equitable society, we must do it together.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if proximity wasn't the new buzzword of the day, collaborative transformation or transformative collaboration is the new buzzword. So that's covered as well. Okay, so let me look at our bingo sheet. Plays the victim. You know, I'm going to circle that one because when they were talking about being in prison on that tour, that the guards doing their jobs or simply being cautious about handing a baseball bat to a convicted felon was somehow an injustice. I'm going to say plays the victim. School to prison pipeline didn't come up. The guy came close. White supremacy, never mentioned. Microaggressions, never mentioned. Colonialism, never mentioned. Credit for something done by others in their demographic, that never really came up. Robin DiAngelo, never mentioned. Rape culture, never mentioned. Toxic, never said. Anecdote that probably never happened. I didn't get a sense of anything that sounded abjectly false of what they said. Or there wasn't a sort of like my 5-year-old walked in and asked me about the merits of thermodynamics or something. So I don't get that one. Speakers should not be in current occupation or position. That's a tough one. I don't know what else she does as a teacher. This particular project and her interpretation of the events involved therein seem a bit misguided. But other than that, I can't say that just based on this one example myself that she's should not be a high school teacher. Bell hooks, feminism, never came up. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. For no reason. I could see someone circling that. I could see how you could take some aspect of what they've said thus far and circle that one. So I won't fault anybody for doing that. Still doesn't get you a bingo though. Wage gap never came up. Patriarchy never came up. Makes racist comment. You know, I just because I'm more inclusive like that, I'm going to say yes to that one because a lot of the presumptions that we as the audience were supposed to have simply based on the aspects of their identity that they listed off Yeah, I'm going to say that counts. Word salad. Yep, we got that one. Baffles or triggers scribe in the first 30 seconds. Yep, that happened. Cultural appropriation never came up, never mentioned. Gratuitous pausing for effect. Nothing in there was any pause that I felt was gratuitous. So unfortunately, guys, this TEDx, as long as it was, so far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned, does not complete a bingo, even if you allow for there being a race, sex, etc. comment for no reason. We don't have a bingo. Amazingly enough, a 21-minute, 32-second TEDx, and we don't get a bingo. Well, for our first outing, no dice. But thank you for playing. And for the last couple minutes before I top this off at the top of the hour, I'll go to you guys in the comments if you have anything you'd like to say, anything mention, anything to correct me on or to bring up otherwise. Let's see. Asian Hippie, congrats, Scribelight, done in less than 90 minutes. Well, I did my best to let them go on without me pausing every 3 seconds, although sometimes I failed at that. Faithless, with 2 people, it is harder to float a blatant lie like that. It's true, I suppose. I mean, but again, I didn't hear anything like, I was talking to my cat yesterday or something like that. Let's see. The whole talk felt like for no reason, says Thrashy. Well, not in their minds. I always have to give a certain level of at least meaningful credit to intent, if not execution. Let's see. Mr. Scott Scribelight, I misread the article. Jason Samuel was denied parole. Oh, okay. Maybe it wasn't him then. Did they mention his full name? I can't remember. Thrashy says the bingo game was fixed. No, that was exactly this. This is about as safe as I can get on a bingo card because I didn't come up with it. At least not the arrangement. That was Frosted Glass, and I don't fault Frosted Glass. Given some of the talks that we've done in just the recent a week or two, I'm sure some of those could have easily filled out a bingo card. Evil One says, thanks for getting me drunk, Scribe. Hey, take responsibility for your own actions. I had my own drink here. You had your own drink there. You took as many sips as you chose to take. It's not my fault. Dang it. Mr. Jones, National Education Association, the largest union in the world. They run American education. Okay. Thank you for that trivia. Faithless, will you shuffle the bingo spots? I might for next time. Maybe that's something I'll do. I'll at least revise that bell hooks one to feminism. If I say feminism and somebody brings up bell hooks, well, then that can count. Okay, but feminism is an abstract concept, certainly. This is Kyle says, this hurt my brain. You have only yourself to blame for watching it. Michael Garrick says he was answering my question. Oh, okay. I don't know. When chat jumps, I have no context to certain things when they're said. This is Kyle says, I'm going to go stream Dark Souls now. Have a great day, everyone. Yeah, Dark Souls is certainly a paradise compared to wading through a TEDx. Let's see. Anything else you guys want to say or mention or comment on? I'll give you the next 3 minutes or so, and then I'll wrap this up. Nothing for you here. If one of these talks gets a bingo, is it more likely to be a PO? Not necessarily, because there are some true believers out there. And most, if not, well, many, if not all, of the TEDx speakers I've looked at in the past, except for those that are up there, obviously using the TEDx stage as a sales pitch. Those I have more questions about their sincerity on certain things inherently. But a lot of people, even if they present things that are incomplete or are questionable, I don't doubt their sincerity of their cause. Let me put it that way. Let's see, Thrashy, we got Lords of the Night today? Yep, tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Ranting Monkeys channel. Barring something changing about that, there will be a Lords of the Night. Mr. Scott Scribelight, I Googled Jason released from prison shooting cop San Quentin, found an article about restorative justice by Jason Samuel about how he met the cop. He shot him. I mean, it seems like kind of an awful coincidence if you got a guy named Jason and a cop named Tom and San Quentin, etc. So, I don't know. Faithless says, trying to blanket, romanticize, and sympathize with criminals boils my blood. Well, sympathizing with people who have been convicted of crimes, depending on the circumstances, is not too far afield. I mean, the intent is that if someone goes to prison, you want them to be disincentivized from behaving that way again and become a law-abiding citizen of society. So I don't have a problem with sympathizing with people who have done something wrong and paid their debt to society. But if you're talking about trying to sugarcoat every aspect of prison to say, well, San Quentin's got a lot of great educational opportunities, but we're all under the thumb of state violence, without acknowledging anything about the acts taken by those, quote unquote, under the thumb of state violence, like a guard tower. That part I find just unforgivably disingenuous. Okay. I mean, there may be violations of someone's rights in prison by the state. Not going to deny that. There may be opportunities for education or job training or for the ability to better move back into society after you've served your time. Not going to argue that at all. Not going to even argue against those things existing. But to leave out completely anything that might have legitimately put someone in that position in the first place, yeah, that part makes me question a whole lot of things about both your intent and your credibility. Thrashy says 3 a.m. my time, so fell asleep last night, sadly. Oh boy. And Vera Vashmadai, at least the prison taught them to read, so prison is great. Well, a silver lining is where you find it, however thin it may be. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on this relatively lengthy but also informative TEDx talk. I may have another one tomorrow. I mean, I have one queued up. I don't know if I'll do it tomorrow. We'll see how timing works out, and I have to work tomorrow, so we'll see. But thank you guys so much for your attendance. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for joining me on our bingo card read. I may make some edits to that. Thank you again to Frosted Glass for putting that together. It gave me the motivation to mitigate my complicity in not having made one myself. Everyone, hope you are all well and safe. If you're not well, please get well soon. If you're not safe, please get safe, I guess. Have a good rest of your Saturday. Hope to see you on Lords of the Night tonight. And take care, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.